So all those things are important, the fertility part really important, but I don't think they are the most important. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a fantastic day. It is Thursday, April 3rd here in South Georgia, and on today's video we're going to have a little tater talk. I'm going to use these raised bed potatoes behind me here to explain to you what I think is the most important factor when trying to grow big yields of potatoes. But before we get into that, let's show off our taters. So in this 4x6 raised bed here, we've got 3 different varieties planted, a pound of each, so a pound in each row. These were planted right around February 14th and they are looking great. And then right here we've got 2 30-foot rows. I think this is Baltic Rose right here and then Huckleberry Gold right there. So 2 different varieties compared to what we've got going on in that raised bed. These were planted just a few days after those in the raised bed, so not quite as far along, but still looking great. So we planted mid-February. Here we are early April, and given the fact most potato varieties are going to take around 90 to 100 days, we're about halfway there. Now in previous videos we've covered lists of important potato growing tips, things like planting at the right time, because you really got to give those potato plants 100 good days before it gets really hot. And when we say really hot, we're talking about temperatures in the 90s. We've also talked about the importance of pre-sprouting or chitting your seed potatoes. Doing that makes them more likely to hit the ground running and less likely to rot in the ground while you're waiting on them to break dormancy. And pre-sprouting, then kind of selecting for the best seed pieces you have, is going to make sure you get some nice even emergence in your potato rows. This is going to be helpful when it comes hilling time. You don't want some tall plants and some really short plants. You want them to all kind of grow nice and even. And we've also talked about how fertility is important. In fact, fertility is really important, and how you want to feed your potatoes with a balanced fertilizer at least 2 times during the grow out. And we've talked many times about the importance of hilling, what that does, and how that allows you to grow more higher quality spuds. And we even demonstrated that last year with a little experiment we did. So all those things are important, the fertility part really important, but I don't think they are the most important factor that's going to contribute to you getting some nice big yields. So the other day when I was out here tending to my taters, I got to thinking, why do we always get higher yields in the raised beds compared to the in-ground garden? We don't ever get skunked on either, but the raised beds always give us a little more production than the in-ground plots do. And to kind of give you a good baseline for what we find is acceptable, we're aiming for a 10 times multiple. That means if we plant 5 pounds of seed potatoes, we're hoping to get 50 pounds come harvest time. So 10 times as much as we planted. Anything over that is great. So in our in-ground plots, we consistently get around that 10 times multiple, but in our raised beds, we can hit 15 sometimes, or maybe even a little higher. So why is our multiple in the raised beds consistently higher than what we get in the ground, kind of regardless of what varieties we're growing? And I think the answer is really simple. Maybe not quite as simple as it seems on the surface, but pretty dang simple. So these potatoes in this raised bed here get watered more frequently than these do. And I don't really know why that is. Probably has something to do with time. If I'm out here in the garden late in the afternoon, I'll always grab the water hose and give that raised bed a little splash of water. But the ones in the in-ground garden, we're dealing with 2 30-foot rows, takes a little longer to water, so I maybe only water those every 2 or 3 days. Now the kicker is here, you've got to have some really nice well-draining soil. You don't want to overwater your taters in some poorly drained soil. That's likely going to end badly for you. But frequent watering in well-drained soil seems to be the recipe for success. And so this is the stuff I've been using to top off these raised bed taters here, kind of heal them as they grow. This is some stuff we get in bulk locally. They call it bed mix. Nice and fine stuff there. Sand, mushroom compost, and a little bit of pine bark. Now this in-ground soil here also drains really well because we've got a nice thick compost layer on top. But like I said earlier, I just don't tend to water these as often as I do the raised bed. So why do those potato plants like that daily watering and that really well-drained soil in the raised bed more than, say, watering every 2 or 3 days in some soil that maybe doesn't drain quite as well? And the answer to that would be, I don't really know, but my harvest data over the last few years would suggest that they really enjoy that daily drizzle, whether they look like they need it or not. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be hard to do if you've got harder, maybe clay soils that don't drain very well. You probably can't get away with watering that often. And you may not want to spend the money or resources to get a nice fluffy layer on top to make that soil really nice and well drained and tater friendly. But it would appear to me that's the real secret to growing taters. Yes, there are other good tips that we mentioned earlier, but that well-drained soil and frequent watering seems to be the trick to me. And as I think about this more, a lot of the old timers I've known over the years who consistently produce big potato harvests were doing this. They'd go out of their garden with their walk-behind tiller or maybe even their tractor, and they would till the absolute snot out of their already sandy soil. Plant their taters in that and then use an overhead sprinkler and water them pretty regularly. Now, tilling the snot out of already sandy soil like that isn't the best thing you can do for long-term soil health, but I do think it allowed them to grow some pretty nice taters. And so although the application is different, they did it a different way, the concept is still the same. Really nice, fluffy soil, frequent watering, big yields. Now, important to note here, just because you have well-drained soil and you water frequently, I don't think that's going to allow you to skip the fertility part of the equation. But if you have well-drained soil and you've been feeding your plants well, and maybe you want to get even higher yields, try watering more frequently. Because intuitively, we see tater plants that look nice and healthy and we think, oh, they're good, they don't need any water today. But I've found just giving them a little splash every day can make those yields even higher come harvest time. And if you're strictly an in-ground tater grower only and you're struggling to get to that 10 times multiple, I would encourage you to do a little experiment, maybe in a large pot, maybe in a grow bag, maybe you have a raised bed you could dedicate to this experiment. But try them in a container with some really soft, well-draining soil, water more often, and see if you don't get a higher return on investment compared to your traditional in-ground methods. So if your soil can tolerate it, that's a big if here, if your soil can tolerate it, try watering more frequently and I bet you'll be rewarded with bigger yields. And if you want to see more of a deep dive into those other potato growing tips I talked about, watch this video right here. We'll go into a little bit more detail to give you kind of a complete growing guide for how to get big potato harvests. Check that out. We'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.